The 2023 State Ownership Report produced by the State Interest and Governance Authority, SIGA, reveals the inefficiencies affecting many of our SOEs. And this demands that we act with conviction and courage to tackle the systemic challenges confronting these enterprises. Many of our specified entities have operated inefficiently for far too long. They've been burdened by waste, underperformance, conflict of interest, and a complete detachment from national interest. Many of our SOEs have been used as mere instruments for generating personal wealth for persons appointed to positions within the entity. And who are the ones responsible for this situation? It's the chief executives, the management, and the management boards of these enterprises. Some of these enterprises have become perennial loss makers, draining public funds with bloated budgets, unjustified allowances and perks, and unnecessary expenditures, while relying on government bailouts as if they were entitled to them. Indeed, many of your entities are at their lowest point in the entire history of the Fourth Republic. Ladies and gentlemen, the era of impunity, mediocrity, and financial recklessness must end today. I'm happy you clapped. It's not going to be business as usual. We're going to reset your entities. Corruption, procurement fraud, and financial mismanagement will be prosecuted strictly, and boards that rubber stamp poor decisions will be replaced. The practice also of, in a few cases, using entity resources and funds to indemnify board members from accountability must cease immediately. SOEs must deliver strategic value, particularly in energy, transport, manufacturing, agriculture, and finance, to support Ghana's industrialization and the 24-hour economy initiative.
Kane swafo ana wahwe sikasem so asese woye minority ranking member Emma Committee on Finance wo Mrashibidefie eye Dr. Amin Adam na ene edomkuma no eye nsentrofo nhyiamu efa akohomesika yisikasem swafo editu dwa no ena wotremu se ohwe figures dodo na obobo so na enye nokre eye boapa eno moye yese de bebe te se de abandada no wa mama yehwe.
On the 2025 fiscal framework, another baseless revelation in the budget is the projection of a sudden reduction in the commitment primary deficit from 3.9% of GDP in 2024 to a sudden primary surplus of 1.5% of GDP in 2025. I wish it were that simple to adjust by 5.4 percentage points between 1 year. I wish it could be done. But this is not possible. And so again, their projection of the fiscal balances for 2025 make this budget not credible and requiring serious scrutiny by the IMF and the people of Ghana. We, the mighty minority, would like to call on the IMF to speak to this in the spirit of transparency, which is one of the cardinal values of the fund. This should be done as a matter of urgency before much damage is done to our country's economy. Already, the government has announced it is returning to the bond market, yet they could not even acknowledge the enhanced debt environment created by the previous MPP government for bringing Ghana's debt to GDP ratio at the end of 2024 to 61.8%. 61.8%. You recall, we had to go to the IMF because of debt distress, because of unsustainable debts. Our debt levels had gotten to about 81% of GDP. If today the debt levels have come down from 81% of GDP to 61.8%, that should tell you that this is not by magic. This is as a result of skilled negotiation by the government. It's as a result of the implementation of a very powerful debt strategy that we have had to implement to bring the debt levels to that level. And ladies and gentlemen, let me add that a 61.8% debt to GDP ratio is lower than the pre-COVID-19 debt to GDP ratio of 65.7% in 2019. So if you look at the debt trajectory, you will see before COVID, our debt to GDP ratio was lower. But because we had to borrow so much to finance our COVID interventions, we had to borrow also to do to address the effect of the Russia-Ukraine war. We had to borrow for the financial cleanup exercise as well. The debt levels went to that 80%. And so if we have now brought it to the level better than the 2019 pre-COVID, it tells you that the MPP government has successfully brought Ghana's debt levels to accelerated, sustainable path. The least the NDC can do is to continue to implement our debt strategy. After all, what is the target of the IMF as far as our debt levels are concerned? The IMF projects Ghana to achieve a target of 55% debt to GDP in net present value terms by 2028. 2028. If by the end of 2024, we've already brought it down to 61.8%, then it means that it is left with just 6 percentage points to achieve the IMF target. And so the NDC government should be able to achieve this in the middle of this year, long ahead of 2028. But Gideon will tell you, the way they've started borrowing, the rate at which they are borrowing, we are very worried that they may return us to unsustainable debt levels.
And Central for Shima, a bason, MPP Amanyuku, Domkuma, Womra, Shibidom Casa, Nakanaso for Big Church, Casem, so honorable Abna or Sayasari, so not to Semu HS, and this Abaya at TCU and Penima and Nedom. Hey, Amokasa, almost you are buying with their bed, any peonia Kume, so Musicasem, a combeske Camono, Ana Esodo.
When you compare our expenditures in 2024, when we had an election, usually with elections, the government spends so much because they have to give the Electoral Commission everything that they will need to conduct a free and fair election. So when you look at the appropriation for 2024, clearly with an election that was fully funded by government alone, the appropriation was 250 billion Ghana cedis. Here we are, NDC telling us that they want to cut waste, reduce, rationalize expenditure, and reduce the waste in the system. They are giving us an expenditure and appropriation of 291 billion Ghana cedis. 291 billion Ghana cedis. No election, we are cutting down. So they say one thing, and the numbers in the budget speaks to something completely different. That also boils down to the credibility of the budget. Let me come to the uncapping that the minister spoke about. The expenditure measures of uncapping transfers to some statutory funds to enable them to fund other government programs is no-brainer. We have done it before. And so it's just continuing with what we also did. Every government has its discretion on how to fund its programs. While we cap the transfer to the statutory funds and use the cap transfers funds to fund free SHS and other programs, this NDC government has decided to uncap transfers to Get Fund so that Get Fund will fund free SHS. We have done it before. It is nothing new. We uncap and cap, and it's at the discretion of the minister. Where you find that you need to restore the capping, you restore it. And we did that in 2017 when we realized that NHIS was saddled with a debt of about 2 billion Ghana cedis in claims. In 2016, that was what the NDC left for us, and we made sure we provided enough funds by restoring the cap funds in NHI to enable them pay this. So we have done it before. It is nothing new. And so we were thinking that with the resetting, something innovative was going to come up, but nothing new came up. We have done it before, and it is normal. Also, by virtue of the debt restructuring, let me say that the government absorbed the Get Fund debt. And so once we absorb the Get Fund debt, there's more room for Get Fund to take on other equally important things. When you also look in the budgets that they provided for us, you realize that all funding coming from the oil revenues, that's the annual budget funding amount, the ABFA, every little fund coming from that has been put into the big push, 13.8 billion, which includes our mineral royalties and the oil revenue as well. And you ask yourself, you dedicate 13.8 billion Ghana cedis into this fund. But when you look in the budget, this is supposed to be their documents for policy and directions. You don't see so much about the big push. But here we are, they voting 13.8 billion Ghana cedis to an initiative called the Big Push without any skin or flesh for Ghanaians to see what exactly they want to do.
Now, Star Ghana Foundation are a share inclusive elections and accountable governance in Ghana project as say. Edi abasobosronko ako ama abaino say. Oba befa National Health Insurance levy ni so abwa na National Health Insurance Scheme ebetimi akọ fom na abwa ma obibia ayahwe mapa etimi edru na bobwa no. Na wadensem yi etudwa abra a civil society organization omo workshop omo de hwe se aban eniema wo kan ye so obeye afia pomodensem so no o ye ni yi anase wonye ni yi se adwumadi na se na omo de ensem yi etudwa na manager Emma Rights to Social Services Portfolio Emma Star Ghana Foundation Ora Raymond Danso ekasai
eye budget no enye nema nyina sebe ye hwehwe na ebetimi ayaman na bejidu ze enema ne bi pie budget no so no eye ema e de chese eye National Health Insurance Levy emese na sika na na mo hia na ho ntine sika ni na entimi ma ema ye mfa nya adwuma o se ye hwe eye hospital titu ankrankro ma bi omudwumadie no bebebre na empebebre no emse sikatua no emantem eba krompo so a ebeche ebi wo so anema ntina ama nkrofo so ekọ for yaresabia obekọ no etimi twuadro ma se kọ na akoto ana se wanhwe ya na wo se wankasa so disika na etua eteme se hyehyɛ a aban de aba sese ebema sika aba NHI scheme nim se na ebe ya eka bi ho bi o betimi ade etua ka na free ho na ama private facility owners who atimi continue no provide services na aban kasa so aban public health sectors no so yetimi so akoso na ya deliver health service ama Mr. Ghana for asem ne kan na Ghana for se hia se sebe yebenya pomudin na enyi ache na yetimi aboa ye man no na yetimi so ediye se eno na hia emfa ho bibi awo emfa ho so wusika se woni sika ntene ye hyiam CSO partners ye dwendwen ekwan e befa so a afi ye koyanim ye betimi so ahwe se aban ne mo ka so obeye no o ya na se etonsi bi ba na yetimi adan akai no na afi so nye no nko a ye se behwe se enema obu no ka se research ade foforo aban ye afi se beboa no eno so ya asade se ye no so no ye de beto aban anim na abo ho dero se ne ba ya aban be ho se enye se CSO for crampo je se de bia na ya nye ne se ana enema enkoso ye bademum yakase ebu ana achia na yache so wo de to binkuma ebeboa na wo de to nifa ebeboa enti hyemu ya be hyemu nyina se akwaku fo ni nyina ya fresh yesos no ya be hyemu se ya dwendwen akwa befa so a ye betimi a monitor broadcast ya be monitor aban dwumadi a ewo health sector enti ya hyehye dwumadi bi efe no manifesto tracking tool eno no specifically ni ye hwe health sector enema aban akasa obeye ebi pharmacy nema aban so obeye ebi apomudin for adwumafo aban so obe momo training ebi so hospital aban so obesisi sa ne mani nyina ye hwe kwan ebefa so a ne nyina ye de ni bedi ye kire na ebrani nyina na ye ne aban so edi nsanwo so ne ya hwese ne ebetimi abam.
Yetwa so akomra shebedwem so afo hwe amanone ensem so na bo sabo kujeto abla kono anso eno emra shebedwem ma amanfo north tone ne okomra shebedwem ko yi nsema no na okasa no chese ene yi ope Ghana passport krata yede yen hihye etu kwan na sidi hanum 500 Ghana cedis no si omo teso de about 350 Ghana cedis ha mensa ne aduonum no kire se we yen hihye omo ye se ne be ya se obi epe passport ni bia ebo no ebekọ fom kakra eno achi nso no ombehwe se enhihye beda ne kwan mu a ope passport a ebe ye ntem ama se ya onsa be kana enhihye kwan a wode ye no atumi akoyi adiama
new passport and is committed to ensuring that the cost remains reasonable while maintaining high security standards. In our efforts to make passports more accessible to all Ghanaians and per instructions I have received from His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama, we are pleased to announce a reduction in the cost of the ordinary passport booklet, that is the 32-page booklet, from the 500 Ghana cedis to 350 Ghana cedis. We will in the coming days be presenting an amendment to the fees and charges to ensure that this reduction is approved by the House from 500 Ghana cedis down to 350 Ghana cedis. That is the new policy position of the Mahama administration. As part of the services that the Passport Office carries out is a service known as expedited service. So for those with emergencies, those who probably medical emergency, business emergency, a student who has to meet a timeline, we have in the structure of the services that the Passport Office renders what is known as expedited service. You pay a little more and then you can have your passport within the same week. So that expedited service is available, and we will urge, I think that sometimes it's probably lack of public education, public awareness. So we are intensifying that so that Ghanaians would know, nurses, doctors who are attending to these patients who may have to fly them out can make themselves available for this service. So we have the expedited service which takes care of emergencies, and that is available.
Abusiafo ha eni ebegyina ne ahome kase ewo no se ba ye de nkomo no beto so amamo eye afi akonhomasi kai sikasem so afo de tu dwabenada no to foforo bi abeba bebem na eno ho nsem ene ebetena se edi ho nkomo ye basese ya